Well, good morning, everyone. Really nice to be with you and absolutely loving all the wide range of talks today. I'm Debbie Holley and I'm the Professor of Learning Innovation in the Department of Nursing Sciences. I'm not actually a nurse and moved into the department about a year ago to help build digital capability, so very fortuitous. And my partner in crime is John Moran, who's our faculty learning technologist. And I can't say enough complimentary things about learning technologists and what they've been doing to support everyone during the pandemic. So one thing I just would ask just before I kick off, we're hoping to do a Mentimeter. So if you could kind of get your mobile phones handy and out, or menti.com if you've got an Android phone and you don't have a QR scanner on it, there will be one coming up in a few minutes. So, as we all know, the pandemic hit last March. What you may not know is all third-year nursing students got called up to the front line to go onto the NHS COVID wards from the 3rd of April. So the whole kind of framing of their degrees completely changed. And suddenly they were going to go into practice, but before they did that, they had to do this unit called Managing Complex Conditions. So we had the challenge of getting this up online, delivered to all of them before they went into practice on the 3rd of April. So that was just the third year students. So everything went online in a hurry. And you know, nursing colleagues are fantastically skilled educators. They're very, very technically competent, but not necessarily digitally competent. So I think it's quite interesting that as we started, we wanted to think about how we could move online, but how we could do this together. And if you just pop back one slide, I just have to have a wailing and a gnashing of teeth moment. This is our fantastic new Health and Social Sciences building, which we were due to move into. And we still haven't got in there. So we didn't even get into our new building before the pandemic impacted. So if you don't mind just hopping forward to John, to the one where you've got the little values. And one thing is the nurses really pride themselves on face-to-face delivery. We've been looking at a humanising curriculum, and that's sort of built in. And a humanising curriculum is very much around looking at values, looking at the different themes, but having the students' digital identity and well-being at the centre of everything we do. And we'd started to do that quite slowly, just as I joined the department. And then, of course, with the pandemic, everything really got escalated really, really fast. So it's all around person-centered learning, and there's a kind of a culture and a philosophy behind it. And John and I realized that you can't just go in and say, here's a whole load of TEL tools, you know, you can learn to use this, you can learn to use this, you can learn to use that. Because we work together in teams, there's a lot of co-creation, and there's a lot of partnership working with practice as well. So it was quite a challenge to think about how we could support people very quickly. So what we did, if you're happy to move on one, John, thank you, is we set up, the minute the pandemic kind of struck and people started to sort of panic a bit about moving everything online very quickly, was John and I thought, well, everybody's really familiar with RVLE as a repository, as I think a lot of people have echoed today. So we set up this thing called the Coronavirus Teach-N-R, and that beautiful plasticine sort of horror you see at the top, that was the week before we actually went into lockdown. I was actually teaching and doing creative methods with some students, and I've got a whole range of beautiful coronavirus plasticine models that I can use. And so we thought, well, we could kind of use that, but use it very, very actively. And so what John and I decided to do was we almost did a daily chat show, like a radio show. It's quite a feminized workforce. And we thought, okay, everybody's familiar with kind of television chat shows and, magazines and e-zines. And so we thought, okay, let's have something that's very, very conversational and supportive. And so we just did a daily drop-in, and we called it the John and Debbie Tech Chat Show. We recorded it, didn't record all of it, and it was just basically thinking about the requirements of the people who came on the day. We always kind of had a 10-minute theme. We were going to talk about Mentimeter or Padlet or this or this or that. And we always did like a little 10-minute recorded demo. But then it was just like a challenge slot, almost like the reader's problems in magazines that everybody flicks to first. So what we started to do was to do that, and people just dropped in, they came along, they came with their conversations, and we'd only been going in our nursing department for, was it 2 weeks, John? And then we got escalated up to faculty level and asked to roll it out across the whole faculty, because this approach was really very much valued, and people were going away and sharing it and talking about it, and you could see the influence of the work as it kind of flowed across the faculty. And I think that's a nice way for learning technology to be rolled out. It's not all about the models and clicking here and clicking there. It's really person-centered, and I think it was that person-centered approach. So people would come along and say, well, I'm teaching my students today, tomorrow, the next day, we want to do this, we want to do that, and then we'd have a conversations with the people who were there. And so that very person-centered way mirrored the value set of nurses, social workers, physiotherapists, and I think that was one of the real key successes, was kind of mapping and mirroring values. So obviously, sort of thinking a little bit about that, we started to think a bit about, well, what do we need to be doing? So, you kind of start, don't you, very quickly, as a lot of people have been talking about. But then we just kind of took a bit of a step back and thought a little bit about, what sort of pedagogies can we really model, not just for the pandemic, but for moving forward? Because, I don't think any of us want to go back to what it was. And we really want to take the best forward. And I really like Stommel's idea on hybrid pedagogies, where you're kind of challenging our notions of our place of learning and to fundamentally to rethink our conception of place. Because our students have their professional space and placements, and then their places with us in the classroom, and now they've got this alternative spaces. And to start off with, of course, everybody tried to do a 1-hour lecture by recording a 1-hour panopto, but John and I were really encouraging people to shake up their conceptions of what you could do. And I really loved what Pip was saying earlier about kind of these playful spaces and more equitable spaces and shared spaces, and thinking about co-creation. And so, the Ellis and Goodyear work that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with says these connections between place and learning can be subtle. And to understand them, you've got to try and think a little bit about these kind of shifting assemblances involving human beings and things, the material, the digital and the hybrid. And, they were talking in 2016, but I think this pandemic has really made that kind of virtual physical space become very much more permeable. And there's been some really interesting work that John Cook did on 3 cases of hybridity. The link's through on the slides if you want to have a look a bit later. So I think it's get your phones out time. So what we've got is a challenge to the audience, I guess. In which ways can you see the physical and virtual becoming increasingly permeable? And I did wonder, Phil, would one of you be kind enough to pick up the Menti code and pop it into the chat, please?
Absolutely, no problem.
And, the menti.com. So you can either scan with your QR, with your camera. If you've got a new camera, just point your camera at the QR code and it'll take you straight to Menti. Or if you've, got another device, you can go onto menti.com. And then if you put in the code, you will see that question. So I'll just leave the question up there for a little while, just for a minute or two, because I know we haven't got much. We've got 5 minutes left, I think.
That's 5 minutes with the questions as well.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
I've only got one slide, 2 slides after this, and one
Fantastic.
of them's a resource one. Okay, John, are things starting to come through? Can you toggle through for me?
They certainly are.
Oh, fantastic. That's amazing. Oh, yeah, we've got Zoom right in the middle. That's oh, and artificial intelligence. Yeah, that's a great one. Necessity, undeniability, collaboration, familiarity, augmented reality.
Augmented reality.
Augmented
It's a
reality.
very interesting one. Something we're currently looking into a fair bit.
We are indeed. Okay, if people want to carry on putting in, John, if you're happy just to toggle back, we can touch base with that at the end again. We could put that up when we get the questions. So just hop through. Thank you. And there we go. And so what we're starting to do is to work towards some more strategic low-tech to high-tech solutions. I ran a workshop this week looking at how we can get our nursing students to look using Google Cardboard and the 360 YouTube clips on their mobile phones. Absolutely loved it. We've also been experimenting on the YouTube 360. There are some lovely well-being, sort of slightly immersive things where you're at a beach, and we're already at the seaside, John and I, so we tend to do forests, but other people do other things. I love Joseph's background there, you know, so we're trying to think about when things get really busy is to just kind of to stop in the middle of our sessions and to try and do something around well-being and thinking about that. We also are doing things like here you can see University Hospitals Dorset. We've got a simulation centre there, and our nurses can go online, and when they're doing the simulations, they tweet them out to us, and we can take part like that. So we're learning of all kinds of different ways where they can go into the simulations and run them for us, and then they're showing them to medical students, but we can also hook in to our nursing cohorts. And then there's lots of different things we're doing as well on Twitter and to think about things like that. Next slide. So we've got lots of student feedback. Here's a beautiful hospital ward, a children's ward at Kingston Hospital. We've got some early childhood nurses as well as our adult nurses and mental health nurses. The typical thing is initially I found it hard to adapt, but now I've got used to it and I quite like it. But I'm still missing the actual physical connection with the tutors and the fuss and the crowds and the cafeteria on the campus, you know, all those kinds of, you know, much more visceral things that we're more tangible things that we're missing. And then the final slide is just some resources that have been in there talking about some of the different events and things like that. And John, if you could maybe go back to the
We've got about a minute and a half left.
Yep, we're done. I was just going to put up the word cloud again, and then we can just use that for questions. Thank you, everyone. Much appreciated.
Thank you. That was a great talk, and sorry to push you. I also need to apologise to Therese. I believe I have actually jumped ahead and put Debbie and John in front. I don't quite know how I've managed to do that.
It threw me off as well.
And it threw me off as well. We all kind of, oh my goodness, where's Teresa gone?
I'm so sorry, everyone. That will teach me for trying to do 3 things at once. So apologies. We do still have Therese, and she will be up next. So yes, I'm very sorry, everyone. I think we do have time for maybe one question. Nick or Steve, are there any in the chat?
Yes, there is one here from Anonymous. Did you provide the cardboard or ask the students to get one themselves? And if you provided it, how did you get it to them?
Okay.
So we did, in fact, provide the students with the Google Cardboard. I believe we got a sort of very small pot of money from within the faculty that allowed them allowed us to purchase them. Debbie can probably explain a little bit more, but we also had a PhD student, Heidi Singleton, who was looking into sort of the augmented reality and the virtual reality and how that can benefit sort of student learning and student teaching. And as part of that, she was able to purchase those, and as part of her sort of ongoing study within the kind of virtual reality world and so on, they were kind of made available to us, and we kind of just gave them to the students, as well as sort of purchasing separate, that we've been able to kind of roll out over the last couple of years now.
Yeah, so we were very fortunate that the diabetes session, which is the particular one that we do with a lot on with the cardboards, the students had already got them, and so they kind of had them at home, so they were able to reuse. But we're thinking about this coming year. We've got a new integrated curriculum. We've got 720 students. We can't afford to be doing that. But having done some work with the students and some focus groups, what we're finding is students would be happy to pay the £5 if it's not a one-off. So I think it's kind of thinking about how we meaningfully embed pedagogically suitable resources and thread it through their curriculum, because I think we have to be really mindful about the digital inequities. I mean, I know there's 3 or 4 people have talked about digital inequity as we've gone through the morning. I do think we have to be really mindful, but it's one thing to kind of ask somebody to do a £5 on Google Cardboard and to do that through. It's completely different to expect them to have a high-spec phone or to have a laptop or a Chromebook. Rural Dorset does have some very, very poor areas, and we pride ourselves as an access university. I'll stop there, but if there's any other questions, please do get in touch with John or I.
Cool, thank you very much.